Hey, Zack Henderson here, and in today's video, we're breaking down the Kettlebell Goblet Squat and how to perform it the right way to develop hip mobility, leg strength, and total body work capacity. We'll also look at some other kettlebell squat variations using both a single and double kettlebells. The cool thing about goblet squats, like most kettlebell exercises, is that it's truly a total body lift. You'll obviously be working your legs and glutes, but because you'll hold the weight in your hands, you'll also be working the shoulders, back, and core as well. The goblet squat was invented by legendary strength coach Dan John, whose work and support has been instrumental in my progress as a trainer. Now, before we grab your kettlebell, let's cover two very important technique points. First, we'll find your optimal stance. Every squat starts at the feet, so getting this right could mean the difference between getting stronger while feeling good versus contending with sore knees and low back pain. Now, let me say right off the bat that there's no one squat stance that is right for everybody. Differences in anatomy, mobility, and strength means that you'll have to experiment to find what feels best for you and your body. But I will show you what to look out for and the simple process I use to help students find what works for them. Your foot position consists of two main parts: the width of your stance and the degree of turnout with the toes. Stance width is pretty simple. Just set your heels 2 to 6 inches outside of hips width. You want just enough space for your hips and torso to fall between the knees. To dial in the toe angle, I like to use this tip from Brett Jones. Stand on a hardwood floor with socks on. You want your feet to be able to slide around with minimal friction. With the feet hip width apart and pointed straight ahead, squeeze the glutes as hard as you can, rock back slightly on the heels, and allow your feet to turn out. You may find that one foot turns out more or less than the other, and this is completely normal. Wherever your feet settle is probably going to be the best angle for your squats. This is how we use hip structure to determine foot position. If it's the other way around, we risk jamming up the hip, rounding the low back, or otherwise compromising the range of motion. In any case, feel free to make adjustments along the way and always be experimenting with what stance feels best and allows you the greatest range of motion. One more quick technique point that will revolutionize the way you squat. Rather than simply falling with gravity, you can supercharge every rep by actively pulling your upper body down into your squat. You achieve this by using your abs and hip flexors to actively control the descent. To get the hang of this technique, you can lie down and have a partner grab the tops of your feet. Pull your knees into your chest as your partner gently resists. This mimics the squat pattern and forces you to achieve full range of motion by actively utilizing your core and hip flexors. This drill can also be performed with a long resistance band. Hold the deepest position for about 5 seconds while maintaining core tightness and a neutral spine. By learning how to actively pull yourself into hip flexion, your squats are going to be stronger and safer, reducing the risk of hip pinching and low back rounding. Now with our stance and hip flexor pull dialed in, it's time to squat. Get the kettlebell into position by quickly deadlifting it off the floor. As the hips lock out, bend the elbows to guide the kettlebell up to chest height. Quickly shift your grip from the top of the handle around to the horns. Settle the bell with a tight grip, elbows point down, and hold a few inches away from the chest. Simultaneously bend at the hips and knees, keep the chest up, and remember to actively pull yourself down into your deepest comfortable range of motion. Allow the elbows to slide just inside the knees. This should ensure your knees are tracking approximately with the middle toes. Keep the spine long and straight at the bottom and double check your midfoot balance. The big toe, pinky toe, and heel should all feel equally loaded. Start the ascent with a grunt to pressurize the core and exhale through to the lockout. The goblet squat is as simple as that. Now, I'm demonstrating the standard horn grip here, but there are two other grip options you can use with the goblet squat. First is the belly hold. You'll tip the kettlebell upside down and grasp around the side so the handle falls between your hands. This grip is particularly useful with competition kettlebells that have straighter horns. This next grip splits the difference and has you holding the belly while hooking your thumbs through the inside of the horns. The handle will tilt slightly downwards and rest against the top of the chest. Crush the kettlebell, squeeze the pecs and lats, and keep your elbows driving in towards each other. Before we take a look at some of the main kettlebell front squat variations, let's address a few common errors. The first mistake is not flexing enough at the knees and simply collapsing forward onto the thighs. This often happens because folks are afraid of allowing their knees to move forward and think it's a sign of bad form. But the squat requires a deep bend in both the knees and the hips, and that means the knees will need to travel slightly forward towards the toes. This is perfectly natural and necessary to target the right muscle groups. The next mistake is excessive low back rounding. This is typically caused by not staying tight enough on the descent or by squatting too deep. Remember to actively pull yourself down, and there's nothing wrong with squatting just below parallel, even if you have the flexibility to go lower. Mistake number 3 is rounding the upper back. Keep the shoulders pulled down and back for a proud chest. You can even think about pulling the kettlebell handle apart to maintain this tension. Of course, you could simply be using a weight that's a little too heavy. Mistake number 4 is allowing the hips to shoot out and tip the torso forwards on the way up. Really think about leading with the upper back and shoulders on the ascent. Again, this could also be due to using a weight that's too heavy. The final mistake is losing your rootedness and allowing the heels to rise. If all your other technique points are solid, this is likely due to tight ankles. Be sure to make ankle mobility a priority in your training, and in the meantime, elevate your heels with squat shoes or stand on weight plates or books. The cool thing about using kettlebells for the squat is all the variations it allows us to perform. So let's start by taking a look at two options for increasing hip mobility working the bottom portion of the squat. First is the prying motion, where you push the knees out with the elbows side to side to get a gentle stretch through the groin. Next is adding a simple bicep curl. Be sure to maintain good posture and core stiffness. Of course, we can squat from the shoulder racked position as well. This requires strong kettlebell clean technique, so be sure to watch that tutorial video if you haven't already. The single rack front squat, much like the single arm swing, develops core strength through its anti-rotation effect. The double front squat is a classic lift for building muscle and teaches you how to breathe under intense pressure and tension. With any kettlebell front squat, be sure not to let the elbows flare out. Keep the shoulders packed down and really use your abs and breath to support the kettlebells. Finally, here's the bottoms up kettlebell squat. Holding the bell upside down requires tremendous grip and arm and shoulder strength and stability. When we squat, we take the foundation out from under the grip, making the core, lats, and arms work even harder in this variation. And there you have it. The kettlebell goblet squat is one of the simplest lifts to learn, but as you can see, it can provide a lifetime's worth of value. Now, if you're new to the kettlebell game, you're definitely going to want to check out my flagship program for beginners called Kettlebell Foundations, which you can learn more about in the description below. Wishing you all the best in your training, and we'll see you in the next video.